I was thinking today that it has been 7 months and 1 day since my mother's trip to heaven. And honestly, it still hurts the same as the day that she passed. And I find myself thinking about her. I was listening to, you know, old an old tape. It was an old cassette tape that I had made back in 1992. And my my sister came down to Maryland to visit, and she brought her daughter who was a baby. And I was just listening to it because I think I was like 15 or 16 at that time, and I was still immature. And here I'm making all these baby sounds for the purpose of getting my niece to laugh and smile and all that. And I look back on it now and I'm like, man, I was such a dork. But she loved it. The babies don't look at it like we do. She loved me making those sounds and stuff. But then I was hearing my father, I was hearing my sister, I was hearing my mother's voice. And I I think about how fast things have happened, how things have transpired. And I find myself when I'm walking to work, I think about her. I look up to the heavens, or I'm driving and I'm looking up to the sky, knowing that she's in heaven. I look at the videos, I look at pictures of her when she was here. I hear her voice. I seen a video of her and my son, and she's cradling my son in her arms while she's reading a book to him. And then another one came up, as a memory where my son wasn't feeling good. He had a fever, but she was holding him in her arms, and she had this look of concern on her face. And then I saw another picture of her. She had shorter hair. It was somewhat curly, and she had a smile on her face. And I'm looking back on all this, and everything that has transpired, that she's not here anymore. And, just thinking, living the rest of my life without seeing her face, without hearing her voice. And I feel that ache in my heart. I think every child that has lost their parent, they feel that. And it's the absolute worst. And I know I have Jesus, but without my son is the only family member I have. I have cousins in other states and stuff, but here I have no one. And my mother was the only family member that I had that I could talk to. We did everything together. She went with me on deliveries. She used to sit right next to me, working on her phone. That picture that I have the day that she passed away. Well, no, it was the picture I used, you know, saying, the video's title was Rest in God, Mom. But that was what she did. She sat next to me and she was playing games on her phone. But it's hearing her voice, And it hurts. Just the reality of her not being here anymore. And so I was driving today, doing work, and I was just thinking about her, and I'm just bawling. And then I have to stop myself because I think maybe I'm being selfish because 47 years I've had my mother, and she's only had her mother for 13 years. So she's up there enjoying her mother. She's enjoying being around my father, her aunts, cousins. And here I want her back on earth, to deal with what she dealt with before. And I never want that. But it's her absence that is really hard. And hearing those audio recordings and seeing video recordings, and just 77, she was still somewhat young. But looking at these pictures, when she was in 30s and 40s, and this was my mother, the person that was the closest to me in my family, the one that was there for me when no one else was, the one I could talk with, the one I could try to encourage and build up and strengthen. It's been 7 months and one day since she left. And in 5 months, it'll be a year that she had been gone. A year. But each day I try to live my life. I try to do my work. I try to be kind. I try to seek God. I try to listen to Him, pay bills. But it can be lonely. I come in to the room that, I'm paying for at night. After I shower, I relax, but I'm alone. And it's so hard to be alone. And it's really hard when you really don't have friends around you that you can hang out with. It seems like all my life consists of is work, and there is no fun. There's nothing to really take my mind off things. I'm faced with looking at this, and I miss my sister. I haven't spoken to her since 2014. And it's around this time that family is really needed. But I don't have anyone except my son. And I have, cousins that are concerned about me, that write me. I have friends that care, that write me, that invite me to different things. But they live, either in other states or a good significant distance away. So I know this is a season. I know things will not always be like this. I'm just waiting to see what God will have for me. But meanwhile, I need to do what I can do. So I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to watch this. If you're watching it this long, maybe you have family members that have passed and you're still dealing with the reality of their passing. Maybe parents, Yeah, you know exactly what it's like to be without them. And, every Mother's Day or every Father's Day, it comes up and you think about them and you bawl. Yesterday I was at church and it was Mother's Day, and I just thought about my mom and I was just crying. But it's all part of life. And I think sometimes we think that it's an impossibility for it to come to us. But it's the cruel fact that our relatives are taken away by, different diseases and stuff. And it's just horrible. But thank you for taking the time to watch. I appreciate it.